Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about my dive into developer Camouflaj's voyeuristic stealth game, Republique. But was my time with this title unimpeachable, or a fast track to an uprising? From my seat. I'm mostly sorry for that one, if only because of what my editors will do if I keep doing this. So, narratively speaking, Republique is a story about a girl known as 390H, or Hope, chronicling her attempts to free herself from the claustrophobic chrysalid known as Metamorphosis. This peculiarly named place is a pocket surveillance state, teeming with an undercurrent of unrest, and yet it's not only her liberty at stake, something she'll grow gradually familiar with as she unravels the secrets of this place. Thankfully, she's not alone on this journey, if only due to the intervention of a mysterious benefactor. That's you, who has managed to somehow find their way into the networks of Metamorphosis. Not only does this allow them to serve as an extra pair of eyes, they can even provide a helping hand in certain circumstances. But will it be enough to see her through the day, or will Hope find herself irrevocably transformed by this wretched Republique? Okay, so, dramatic synopsis aside, I can definitely respect Republique's storytelling chops. For one thing, while there's a number of obligatory scenes that help to drive the central plot forward, there's also an absolutely immense amount of optional world building to be discovered. Whether it's emails between employees or messages recorded by cameras, you're given a backdoor glimpse into the day-to-day lives of Metamorphosis staff. In some cases, this serves to build up suspense, as it helps to underline some of the cruelties and dangers of the place, or to hint at the nature of some of the dreadful euphemisms that end up central to the story. But in other instances, these moments serve to further flesh out the cast, providing backgrounds, motivations, or even simply glimpses of humanity that might be missed. Suffice to say, they more than did their job in feeding my desire to scour for every iota of data that I could try to find and get answers, even when it meant that I might uncover a bleak truth. Though, nothing quite matches just how legitimately invested I became in Daniel Zager's arc, a journalist who infiltrated Metamorphosis only to wind up as an enemy of the state. Cassette tapes and audio logs tied to his character are not only a hoot to listen to, courtesy of some stellar voice acting on David Hayter's part, they also represent an intricate adventure that happened alongside yours. This ever-growing interest helped to ensure that I did my best to scrounge up all of the collectibles I could, since that's where these optional story elements were to be found. Really, the sole narrative pitfall I can think of is the way the story comes together in the final episode. This isn't even a critique about that chapter at large either, but rather just a distaste for the way that the narrative moved forward, upping the ante with each climatic episode, only to simply tie everything off with something that I can describe as an abrupt and altogether unsatisfying cessation. Like Lost, I guess.
Pee on it, man! You need to pee on it!
It's not just a story that has its highs and lows either. Mechanically, Republique is a stealth game, but it plays out fairly oddly, given that you're not quite in control of our protagonist, Hope. Rather, you take the role of the seemingly altruistic voyeur, who hops between the vast array of cameras which populate Metamorphosis. With this pseudo-omniscience, you're tasked with scouting out patrolling guards and much-needed supplies, and then praying Hope sticks to the routes you've pathed out. See, if you're using the default mouse and keyboard combo, clicking somewhere on the screen orders her to get there in whatever manner she sees fit. And whilst this is fine sometimes, there's moments where the AI will make absolutely baffling decisions to double back or potentially fail to move to a better hiding spot before it's too late. I'm also a bit guilty of sometimes double-clicking when she failed to respond, leading her to sprinting, which is almost a surefire way to get caught, given that all the enemies are quick and can hear you running. Thankfully, having your cover blown isn't a death penalty, and doesn't reverse anything you've done insofar as skulking about and progressing the story. But you will find yourself stuffed into one of the myriad containment cells on premise. In and of itself, this represents more of a slap on the wrist, with the real downside coming in the form of all the fun contraband you've been pickpocketing or looting along your way being confiscated. This includes such fun party favors as tasers that knock people unconscious, tear gas that staggers any type of enemy, or even sleep mines. All this good stuff gets pilfered by the guy who caught you, thereby obliging you to hunt him down wherever they happen to be patrolling in an effort to retrieve your stuff. Whilst I'm grateful they don't actually jack your rightfully stolen collectibles, this did lead to more than a few instances where I found myself needing to weave my way into a heavily guarded area, somehow pickpocket all my stuff from one guard, and then realize I'm trapped. Seriously, at one point I simply resigned myself to getting caught by different guards, if only so I could eventually have my inventory gradually travel to a more convenient victim. All this said, you can probably imagine just how happy I was to discover that there was a way to directly control the protagonist, if you're willing to use a controller. Sadly, though this did enable me to manage a few specific sequences with a bit more finesse than the AA's automatic pathing would normally allow, it also lent itself to a whole new slew of problems. See, when Hope passes by cameras, you'll frequently find your perspective automatically switch to it. Something which is sometimes helpful, but other times a complete nightmare if you're trying to scout ahead for patrolling guards or other obstacles. On its own, it's a calamity waiting to happen, but it's then compounded with the controller since your movement is relative to those cameras you're swapping between. And given my personal experience with rapidly swapping between cameras with the controller was wonky at best. And well, that's why I ended up biting the bullet and just sticking with the default controls. Except when there was collectibles that Hope refused to step over to that I could see due to weird pathing issues with the mouse. Then I was plugging in the controller just to grab those. Seriously, nothing was going to stop me from gathering up as much of them as possible with that sweet, sweet dialogue. In any case, overall, the gameplay does stay fairly consistent between the various episodes, with the largest addition to your repertoire coming courtesy of the data broker. While it's technically optional, you'd be remiss on not taking advantage of his services, as he can grant you some brand new skills, so long as you trade him the information you find along your journey. While some of these simply expand your capacity to learn more about the facility, there's also more active abilities like seeing patrol routes, or distracting guards you can pickpocket or move past them safely. Quite frankly, going through the game as thoroughly as I did, I never really had any issue in acquiring these abilities close to the moment they were available, which really helped to make progressing forward a lot less painful than it might have otherwise been. And that meant I got to soak in the ambience, and boy is there a lot of it. In a visual sense, this game just looks good. Like, I actually paused or sat down occasionally and marveled at just how impressive some of the scenes and set pieces were. But what really got me the most for this game is all the friggin' voice acting. Fittingly enough, for a game about a surveillance state, you spend a lot of time eavesdropping on people or digging up past records of what they said, and the voice acting for all of it is on point. Frankly, as much as I'd found the Overseer an unpleasant character, I had a blast listening to the scathing critiques he'd given of the contraband books I'd discovered. And those illustrious Zagger tapes I'd mentioned earlier? It's David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake, playing a paranoid alcoholic journalist who's effectively narrating his own journey to topple Metamorphosis.
War has changed.
All while doubtlessly drinking, given that if you took a shot for every time you heard a glass clink, you'd probably induce liver failure on yourself before you went through every tape in a chapter. Overall, it's great, and started to ensure that I became thoroughly invested in finding out more about the characters in the audio-only segments. And the sound design and music at large is also just solid. But yeah, that's all the finer points, which brings us to our finale. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty fond of the game. The story managed to elicit both tension and curiosity from me, and really had me hyped for each new chapter of the game, which is part of why I'd gone so aggravated at the ultimate conclusion, just because of how invested I'd been. And gameplay-wise, yes, there's distinctly frustrating moments, like with Hope's sometimes brain-dead pathing or the camera swapping around while you moved, potentially while you're trying to keep tabs on a guard. But those were really the fundamental issues I had that weren't self-induced, because I'll entirely admit that the majority of my jail time in this game was self-induced. Because I am a fucking ridiculous gremlin that compulsively hoards collectibles as though my life depended on it. Maybe if they hadn't spent so much work on making the voice acting good or providing so many character building bits of lore, I would have been able to resist. But honestly, pickpocketing someone, steal their taser and then tase them with it is also a pretty hard to resist power move, so maybe not. In any case, I'd say there's enough here that I can genuinely call this title a hit, and one that I would recommend, especially since all the episodes are out right now and part of the full game. But please don't flame me if you hate the ending. You were warned. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. If you have an interest in supporting my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know there's a new release. There's also a Discord, links in the description. You should become a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. That said, I'll catch you on the new episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.